Welcome to the Embodied Enlightenment podcast, your podcast for a healthier, happier, more soul-fueled you. I'm your host, Carrie Merriam, here to guide you to reclaim your power to live your ultimate life. Your journey to expanded conscious awareness begins right now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Embodied Enlightenment podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Today's episode is going to be super juicy because we have Aaron here from Bali. He's in Bali even though he's a Californian. Aaron, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure to join you on your show.
And if you guys don't know Aaron, go and check him out. He is a transformational sex and relationship coach, a facilitator, and speaker. He came from a childhood of complete chaos, dysfunction, and at a young age, completely lost his faith in humanity. After attending the prestigious U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, he found a great job, traveled the world, and made tons of money, but he realized he wanted more. His soul journey brought him close to death numerous times on both the high seas and his travels to remote places across the globe. Through these experiences, he realized that life is not about personal achievements and egotistical desires, but rather about deep soul remembrance and fulfilling one's dharma. He's learned from the great masters in the field of sexuality and transformation, including earning a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And now he helps his clients remember who they truly are in order to awaken their inner erotic wisdom. Aaron, again, thank you so much for being here. What an interesting bio and story. Deep needs? How do I not know this about you?
I say I went from navigating ships to navigating souls. That's kind of the tagline I like to use.
Amazing. That makes sense because you did live on a boat for a while. So now it's all coming full circle. It's all the puzzle pieces of you are solidifying.
All coming to frame.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see where the conversation unfolds because the connection that we had and our love for Tantra and really sacred sexual energy and using that energy as a powerful life force to drive our experience of life. So I'd love to dive right in on connecting with that essence, that sexual power of ourselves and how you get people there to understand that.
Yeah. Well, I find, a lot of times in this transformational field, like I've been coaching for the last 10 years or so, and there's a big desire for people to ascend, for people to go up, to find their higher self, to find the cosmos, to find their ethereal, and they kind of end up living in this very, love and light type space. And the last probably 4 or 5 years for me, after doing my master's and diving into a lot of this work for a long time, was really much more of a descent journey, like going down into the base, into the lower chakra, into the places where the guilt, the shame, the fear, all of those kind of murky, darker energies lie. And I find that it's like if you were to take a flute or a pipe, and that pipe was going from the base all the way to the crown. And for most people, that pipe isn't really flowing very fluidly. There's a lot of stuck energy in between. So really, I find that working with the world of sacred sexuality and Tantra, it's helping to clear, especially a lot of the shame and the things that we hold in our lower base, so that energy can flow up to down and back and forth. So we can open up our crown, we can open up our head, but then we can actually drop consciousness into matter.
It's all making sense to me right now. This is why I love to talk to you. I feel like you're the missing puzzle piece for so much shit in my life. Because how I normally speak to it is not nearly as eloquently as that, so thank you. I usually yogis really or spiritual people really like to go hang out with the frogs, take their shoes off, and never come back to earth. They jump back into their body. And I try to help people as well come back into their body and reintegrate into society, which does bring up all of these fears, all of these insecurities, because we're reflecting the primary consciousness of society, which is embedded in fears, embedded in dysfunction and stuck energy. So I love that. Now I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
This makes perfect sense. And it's like the part around sexuality that's so sort of funny to me is we're born, we're here because of primal sexual energy. Yet it's the very energy that society condemns and pushes down the most. It's like, you if there's a nipple showing on somewhere, it's like, oh my God, what is happening? It's a nipple. It's like the association with sexuality is so completely misstrued, having to do with, you can look at the church, you can look at social and cultural conditionings. But really, the more that conversation happens, and we can actually all own the fact that we are erotic sexual beings that are alive, that have full life force moving through us. We love to play, we love to connect, we love to study, but we also love to fuck. We also love to go into the bedroom and be wild and crazy. But yet there's usually such a large contrast between those two. And that was a big part of my own world. For so long, I had my spiritual coaching, yoga, all this world. And then I had my sex life. And it was like, I wasn't meaning to separate it. But the more I actually began to integrate these pieces and recognize that I can use that same like intense, wild energy I cultivate in the bedroom and bring it into soul purpose, bring it into sovereign power, bring it into the abundance and the money that I'm generating out into the world. And then everything begins to really flow beautifully and congruently.
Teach us. I have so many questions for you. I'm going to try to pull my excitement back because I really got you on this podcast and I definitely need to bring you back. So my understanding is that all pleasure and all pain is part of the intellectual aspect of ourselves, right? The entire emotional experience from a spiritual perspective. I can't speak from a scientific perspective, but from a psychological, spiritual perspective, my understanding is all pleasure and pain exist within the mind, within the intellectual understanding. And the deeper that I go into the work of Tantra and the work of sacred sexual energy and prana, I feel like they at some point merge. There's a lot of unification, not some, that needs to happen to be able to really unite that sexual energy to direct it out into the world. But how it's taught in my understanding and perception of what I've seen is that there's a lot of confusion. There's either Tantra that's like all about the mind, or there's Tantra that's all about the energy. So could you kind of walk us through what your beliefs are within that separation or unification of those two aspects? And does
Yeah,
that make sense?
it completely, and it's a great question. And it's like, I look at Tantra really as it's life, it's love, it's everything. We love to categorize Tantra as just sacred sexuality, but it's everything, And when I started kind of incorporating more tantric teachings into my life, I had been teaching it for a far long time before I ever called it Tantra. And I was like, oh, okay, this is all actually very much the same. So the way I like to look at like the mind is, for me as a navigator on a ship, when you're on the bridge of a ship, you have a co-navigator and you have a navigator. The co-navigator, he assimilates all of the information. He or she assimilates all the information up there, the lighthouse, the weather patterns, the currents, all the stuff that's happening, and then feeds that into the navigator. The navigator then takes all that and then makes the decision of how the vessel is going to turn, where we're going to go, what needs to happen. So what most people live their life as is their mind is their navigator, their heart is their co-navigator. I help them make that shift so that the mind is actually the assimilating part of us that just takes in all of this world around, the good, the bad, the kind, the cool, the naughty, the nice, happening simultaneously, because it's always happening. We're living in a bioelectric magnetic body that is made up of duality. So the mind only knows duality. When we transcend that duality, when we see these complementary opposites happening, then we actually begin to open up more of the channels of the heart to make decisions and to live from that awakened heart level of being. The way this relates to sexuality is very similar. It's like the same level of dynamic balance happens in our genitals as well, happens in our belly. It's like there's a male and there's a female inside of every one of us. Except you're in a female body, I'm in a male body. So one of the biggest pieces I support people a lot with is helping them awaken and move through their contrasexual self. Like the mind understands this, the contrasexual self is that little boy, that boy that's inside of you and the woman that's inside of me, because when he or she can actually start to feel and to connect into the world, then all of the other emotions that are associated to that inner being begin to come forth. So I say all that as a framework, as though when all of this is flowing and we can see our inner man and our inner woman dancing, when we can see our kindness and our cruelty, when we can see the places inside that are always happening in polarity, then we don't get attached to it. We just recognize it as being there. And then the essence of our soul, the essence of our beingness, the essence of our love actually begins to share itself into the world. And we're not trying to find love to fulfill the wounds of us. We're not trying to meet somebody because we're needy underneath. When we know that we're equally as completely worthy and as completely abandoned as anyone else in the world, and there's nothing else we need to do. We can actually just love and open up the spaciousness of our heart.
Mm. Completely abandoned and completely worthy. I love that. I love that.
Hmm.
Yeah, again, there's just so many things to continue to unravel within that statement, but I'm going to really make it about others and not about me and call you later.
Perfect.
If people are wanting to get into this work and really wanting to start to work with their lower chakras and recognize where things are stuck energy to ignite things in the bedroom and or in their lives, how would you help individuals first witness what is separate from self or kind of needing to be reflected back upon self for healing and integration? And then how can we bring that into deeper alignment to ignite this power that we all have?
So I find that the best way to, great questions, the best way to really assimilate and understand is tracking our emotional body. When we have a reaction to something, when we either get elated or we get angry or we get really high or we get really low, there's usually some part about that situation, that being, that's reflecting back to us some part of us that we haven't learned to love and appreciate. So I won't go too much into the neurology, but essentially they're like the parts of our being from our past that are unequilibrated. So we're naturally, because we are these attracting beings, we're attracting the people, places, and experiences to force us to honor and appreciate the perfection of our past. So our emotions are literally our tracking mechanism for tracking the parts of us that we are that's putting us off kilter. And what happens in our emotions, which is most correlated to our belly, is that our emotional body for a lot of people is completely shut down because at a young age we're told, don't cry, don't be loud in public, we're not allowed to do this, don't be wild. So we get suppressed and compressed and pushed down and pushed down. And I see it all the time when I work with people either in a retreat or one-on-one. Like when they finally feel there's full permission for their emotional body to come forth and to express the wild anger or the wild craziness or the sadness, it's like there's an entire river of emotions that pour through it. It's like moving rocks that were covering a dam, and all of a sudden it's like whoo, it's flowing because there's so much energy. And what happens is when those emotions express itself, then everything that those emotions were blocking energetically on a you could say on a kundalini level, that as soon as those emotions are cleared out, it makes more spaciousness in our body to allow more love to enter. Love, not a mushy gushy love lost in the clouds. Love, a balanced, integrated, space of accepting and loving joy, freedom, and the beauty of this universe.
Mm. Jai.
Try.
Okay, let's talk about money and sex.
All right, let's do it.
You brought it up and you made such an interesting comment. And everything obviously is connected, but I really never thought about these two being directly correlated. So I'm super curious because you made a comment that obviously when everything's in alignment, working through those lower chakras, obviously safety and security, that root base, which is directly connected to your sexual energy, how that is allowing more money to more abundance, I should say, to come into your life. So could you kind of talk us through that and maybe get some of the listeners some tips on how to have better sex and more money? Because obviously we all want that.
I think we all want that for sure. So the money piece, it's like is directly connected to our power, which is directly connected to our base. So I've experienced this a lot, especially in the last year or two. The more that I've cleared through, like I remember the first time I did some sacred spot work just in my own body. Like the next day, my handstands were fluid. Like my body was just flying, and I literally in the day or two after that started to feel more abundance coming in, because energy and abundance and money is going to go where there's space for it to allow. But when, like, if you look at the being a tight ass, like that, there's a lot of truth to that, because especially both men and women, there's so much condensed matter, so much condensed energy in our ass, especially. I won't go into a whole dialogue into the ass, but there's a lot of energy that's condensed there. And
We're
the
all
more that
carrying a lot of shit,
yeah,
literally.
a lot. And so we want to be abundant, but we're trying to do it through our mind. And for so long, I was like, okay, I need to figure out the next new thing. How do I create more abundance into my world? So, but it was all coming from the mind. I had to drop deeper into my body. I had to assimilate more of this. And I found that one of the best tools for doing this is activating my erotic body, activating my sexual body. So and not necessarily to then go have sex. And this is the piece. We can activate our erotic body, but then we can look at the places of money. We can begin to tune into the places of where am I holding my power back? Because then I'm using this energy to circulate it through my body, and we become more alive. So there are these weekends I'm doing, starting in the US at the end of March, called Purpose, Power, Sex, and Money. And it's like integrating sexual energy with those three pieces, purpose, power, and money, because it's really quite simple. When we're more free and we're more spacious in the bedroom with our sexual energy, I see it time after time after time again with clients, the things that open up in their life with work. I mean, I have a friend, lover out here. I remember years ago we were in this beautiful dance together, and she was working through quite a bit of things kind of in her base, and we were making love, and it was amazing because every single time we kind of had these beautiful healing sessions together. It would happen 3 or 4 times, 30 minutes to an hour after. We'd be sitting there working, and she would get some new call about work. She would get some new call about a job offer. And like each time she looks at me, she's like, you're not going to guess. I'm like, there's something new. I'm like, yeah, because we're clearing out all of the bullshit and the stuff from the past, all the emotions that are holding down. It's like, and this is the thing with trauma and emotions and speaking into sexual energy that is quite misunderstood in a lot of the psychological field, is that for trauma to really heal, to really be healed and to move through, we usually have to meet it at the same level of energy to which we received it.
Mm.
And that's incredibly terrifying. But this is why I love creating, like the men's group I'm about to start tomorrow in Melbourne. We're basically looking at a lot of the deep sexual shadows of homophobia, of seed wars between men, and of having embodied exercises that are clearing that energy so that they can be more loving, alive, awake beings. And it's when you're doing this type of work with men, the amount of fear that comes up, oh my God. It's crazy. I love it. Like it's like filling a room full of men compared to men and women. It's a whole other journey. Like men are so resistant because if you look back at this contrasexual self, there's a little girl inside these men that are terrified of the world. They're absolutely terrified, and they're holding like, is it safe? Can I come out? And just for so long they're beaten down and they're beaten down, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, whether it's psychologically, all that emotion is stored. You can see my excitement with this work, how
Yeah.
much I get it. It's so powerful when it happens. And I just watched. Like a few weeks ago, I had a retreat out here in Bali, and watching the beings, it was a tantric soul immersion for 8 days. Watching the beings come in on the first day to them leaving on the last day, it's just like, it's literally like their entire lives have completely changed. Their energetic frequency to which they're fluctuating about in the world massively shifts.
Mm. And the men are really stepping up, I feel like. They're
Mm.
really stepping up and wanting to do this work of what I've witnessed. It's, been teaching for 10 years yoga and ecstatic dance and all of those other practices that you and I share. It used to be primarily women that would come to me, and now it's primarily men.
Mm.
All of my courses, it's like 80% men and 20% women. And for a while, it was 80% women and 20% men. And then it was like 50-50. And this year, like the men keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. So they're ready. The masculine
Hmm.
is ready.
Hmm. And this is the piece. Like I just did a post the other day. It's like I hear for so often women saying, "Where are all the good men? Where are all the good men?" So I run these weekend immersions called the Art of Loving Men, and women come. It's an all women thing, and they're like, "Okay, I want to learn how to love men." And I basically put a mirror up to them and say, "The man that you want to love is the man that's inside you. Until you can love this man inside of you, the outside world is only going to be a reflection of your inner reality."
Mm. So again, so many questions. Aaron.
I kind of have a way of doing that. I
I
open up a lot of
know.
boxes.
I love it. So I understand that we are as much feminine as we are masculine. And it has nothing to do with the physical body that we inhabit. But we typically come in with a predominant energy within one.
Hmm.
Is that correct?
For sure. If you're in a female body, you're typically demonstrating and being more feminine characteristics. If you're in a male body, you're typically demonstrating more masculine characteristics. You have both, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
part of the conditioned reality. Yeah.
So I never thought about like the inner child within me, like the wounded aspect of myself that I call shadow, being a little boy. I always thought of it as a little girl. So
Mm.
is it both, or is my shadow the little boy? And how do I start to recognize that masculine part of myself that needs to be healed?
Well, again, there's never a matter of like trying to figure out what needs to be healed. It's
Mhm.
tracking the body on a day-to-day basis to where am I feeling resistance, where am I feeling deep openness, where am I feeling resistance, and yeah, I mean the really beginning to tune into, like I had a woman who just came for a session the other day, and I took her into a meditation of like really going into her little boy, giving him a name, allowing him to give a voice. Like a lot of the work I do in retreats and things is really beginning to give voice to a lot of these different aspects within us. And when we can begin to give voice in writing, in literal voice, then we can actually start to tune into the energetic frequency of that being. And what happens for women as well as for men. So for women, like that little boy, he'll start to mature, he'll start to grow up, he'll start to find what it feels like to have a cock for the first time. Like all these things. It's like, whoa, the responsibility. I mean, like I love watching women like find their ethereal phallus for the first time. It's like, whoa, oh my God, I can recognize the responsibility of what it feels like to be a man and like the challenges of that and everything else. And the same thing for men going into their inner feminine and a bit more of the softness and the sensitivity and the openness that happens with that. So it's, to me, like in this work, I find that the contrasexual self if you were to look at the world from the little boys and little girls that are running things, you actually can make sense of the chaos we're living in.
Mm.
Because there's some deeply high, I just wrote a blog the other day. I'll send it to you. It's about like how men can cultivate more of their inner feminine and how they can do it more effectively. And it's like part of that is for a man, it's increasing some of the sensitivities, increasing some of the places, because a man's body opens from the inside out, a woman's body opens from the outside in. So for a woman to more helpfully develop their masculine characteristics, it's like beginning to have that dialogue, beginning to feel like energetically, what is it like to engage with another person from a masculine energy? What does it feel like to be, and not necessarily always in a business format, because a lot of women are like, oh, I'm very masculine. I have my business, I have this, I have that. But it's more of this, like, there tends to be a bit more of an immature masculine that isn't able to hold the feminine in a man.
It's like little boy syndrome in women.
Yeah. And if you look at, like, this was a really eye-opening piece for me when it's one of the reasons I love doing men's work, is that my inner woman could trust and be held better than the masculine in a man than the masculine in a woman.
Mm.
And so she felt more permission to come out. And now, like, some of the session work I do is from her supporting women to begin to cultivate more of their masculine. So it's like she's grown up a lot more in the last few years and has really started to hold a bit more maturity. Certainly at times she can be a bit manipulative and conniving. But, it's like, and what's wild is when you look at this in the space of relating, there's actually 4 relationships that are happening in every dynamic.
Mm.
Your woman with his man, your man with his woman, brother, sister, sister.
Mm.
It changes everything.
Mm. I have so
Lots to think about.
So much to chew on, Aaron. We're gonna have you back. Okay, if people want to work with you, where can they find you?
So my website, aaronkleinerman.com. You can go there. You can get a free ebook of 5 tools to increase your love and intimacy, as well as, I often do 15-20 minute kind of intro calls for people that are like, I'm having challenges, I just want to talk to someone, and I'll just talk to them and kind of ease some of their comforts. And then, I do a lot of session work via Skype, in person, pretty much all over the planet. So find me, Aaron Kleinerman, AARONKLEINERMAN.com. Put it on the comments and everything in this. So
amazing. And if there's one message that is coming through you right now to be shared to close the episode together, what would that be?
Well, the place in which you're driving this in terms of the enlightenment from within is what I really feel from this. For people to access the enlightenment from within, begin to descend down, begin to look down instead of up, and move beyond the spiritual ramifications of going up and leaving that. So as we go down, and then we can actually meet the down and the up at the heart and expand the heart so that the soul's wisdom begins to be applied into the world.
Yes. I'm going to use that. Embodied enlightenment. So good. Thank you so much for sharing your heart and your laughter and your smiles and just your gifts. Such incredible wisdom. I'm so grateful.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy to have this conversation.
Thank you, everyone, again, so much for joining another episode of Embodied Enlightenment. I am your host, Carrie Merriam. Do Aaron and I a favor, share this episode. Send it to people that want to create more unification with themselves, to find enlightenment within, and that are ready to descend in their bodies to be bigger light forces in the world. Until next week, we'll see you then. Thanks for being here.
See you.
I'm Carrie Merriam, and you've been listening to the Embodied Enlightenment podcast. You can follow Embodied Enlightenment on Instagram or join the private Facebook group as well. You can also follow me, Carrie Merriam, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you've liked this podcast, please go over to iTunes or YouTube and comment, subscribe, and leave a review. And if you think someone could benefit from the teachings within this episode, please feel free to share it. Stay tuned next week for another conscious conversation. And as always, thank you so much